Hey everybody, it's John here from VidGamiac.com. Welcome to the first part of our Final Fantasy X HD Remaster Overcoming the Nemesis guide. In this part, we will be covering capturing every single type of fiend in Spira. So, capturing and the monster arena is going to become available to you once you get to the Calmlands. What you want to do is you want to head to the arena. It's going to be this right turn right before you get into the valley leading up to Mount Gagazet. So make sure you make this little detour when you are in the Calmlands. Once you're in the Calmlands, the game opens up to you a bit and you can feel free to explore some of the early post-game content. So once you get to the arena for the first time, the old man is going to explain to you what he wants you to do. He's basically going to teach you about capturing. The first step you have to do is you have to buy some capture weapons. So make sure you hit up his shop. He's the only person in the world who will sell capture weapons. And you want to buy capture weapons for whoever you have in your party who does any attacking. So to capture a fiend, all you have to do is defeat them using one of these capture weapons. So make sure you spec them out to your liking. I personally like to add sensor on one of my fighters, and then the other one I like to add piercing. That way I can have a read on the enemy's HP as well as enemies that have tough defense. We can get through them a lot easier. So for me, I'm using Titus, Auron, Yuna in my current party. So Titus and Auron are going to be my main attackers, and I'm going to have them do the capturing. When you're ready to start capturing monsters, just head outside and just run around in circles until you trip a random encounter. And your goal for this is to basically defeat 10 of every fiend with a person who has one of these capture weapons. So whenever you defeat a fiend with one of the capture weapons, it's going to tell you X fiend is captured, and we'll do that until you have captured 10 of them. Once you've captured 10 of them, it will basically tell you that you've hit the limit and you can't capture anymore. So basically, if you run into duplicates, you just want to keep capturing them since you need 10 of each in order to complete the monster arena. Anyways, just keep running into random encounters and keep capturing fiends until you have filled out 10 of each. There are going to be a total of 9 different fiends to capture in the Calmlands. So all of the enemies in the Calmlands are up for capture with the exception of the Machina enemies. Machina enemies do not count towards capturing since you aren't able to capture them. With that being said, there are going to be a total of 9 enemies that you can capture. So there are going to be 5 common ones, which include the Skull, the Nibiros, the Flameflon, the Shred, and the Coral. As for the remaining 4, they're going to be a little more hard to find, and your best place to have a higher encounter rate is going to be the northwest section of the Calmlands. So head back to the travel agency and then head around the little crack thing, and you want to kind of stay in this corner. And here is where you're going to have a lot easier time finding the Anacondor, the Ogre, the Chimera Brain, and the Marlboro. Now, once you decide to take on these stronger enemies, you might run into a little trouble, especially if you are lower level. For the Anacondors, they are going to cast Petrification, so make sure you're prepared either by buying slops or having a good healer on your team who knows Asuna and can get rid of the Petrification right away, because if you let it get out of hand, you will lose just because Petrification is going to take out your party if everyone is petrified. For the Chimera Brains, I recommend hitting all of the null spells, that way none of their attacks can get through. For the Ogres, they hit really hard, so make sure you cast Protect, and make sure your guys are hitting delay attacks, like Delay Attack or Delay Buster. And for the Marlboros, these guys are really rough, especially if you give them a turn. So I recommend using Summons if you're just starting out to avoid bad breath, and then once you weaken it up to a point where you could take it out in one hit, just switch back to your capture guys and make sure you land the finishing blow on the Marlboro. Keep that in mind, you do not have to do a significant amount of damage to the enemy in order to capture them. As long as the finishing hit comes from someone with a capture weapon, it will count towards the capture. Once you get 10 of each enemy from the Calmlands, the old man is going to start tasking you with capturing enemies from other areas. The first area you can head off to explore is going to be the Cavern of the Stolen Faith. On the way to Mount Gagazet, you are going to notice this bridge, and you can actually go underneath it, which should take you into the valley. Once you're in here, you should be in this area called the Cavern of the Stolen Faith. You're going to get some cutscene stuff. It's pretty much a side mission, which gives you an additional Aeon. First enemy up for grabs is going to appear outside on the gorge. It is going to be the Epodge. This is the only capturable enemy that is going to spawn outdoors, so might as well knock out your 10 here while their encounter rate is very high. They are also going to appear inside the cavern, but might as well get them out there when they have a more guaranteed spawn. Once you head on inside, the enemies you want to try to get 10 of each are going to be the Yowie. Then you have the Thorn. It's going to be the mushroom type of enemy. Be very careful about its counterattack, which is going to be Pollen, which inflicts some pretty bad status conditions on you. Also use Null Blaze since it only attacks using fire spells. Next up is going to be the Valhalla, who's going to be an alternate on the Dual Horn. He's very easy to defeat with a character with piercing. You have the Imp, which you need pretty high accuracy in order to hit. Then you have the Nidhogg, who's going to be a type of Drake. Piercing weapons and Null Blaze, highly recommended since it only uses fire attacks. Next up is going to be the Dark Elemental. This will basically cast Reflect on itself and hit you with a bunch of reflected spells. Armor Break and just spam physical attacks, and he should go down in no time once you break his armor. Next on the list is going to be the Ghost. He is going to cast Doom on one of your guys. If he does do that, just switch them out and then switch them back in when it's time to land the finishing blow so you can get the capture. And then finally, the last enemy, who's going to be the rare enemy of the area, is going to be the Tonberry. Now, Tonberry spawns are going to appear more frequently on these little green patches of dirt. The closest one is going to be right after the T-shaped intersection. Make sure you take a right into this little detour room, and the green patch is going to be right here. Run around on this green patch, and Tonberries should appear more likely here for some reason. So Tonberries are very annoying to fight, especially this early on in the game. I recommend just summoning an Aeon and basically weakening it up to the point where you can kill it right away. The reason for that is every time you attack it with a person, it's going to counterattack with Karma, which will mess you up, especially if you're using your more frequently used characters against it. It will hit your Aeons with Voodoo, which will pretty much insta-KO them, which is kind of annoying, but as long as you just keep up that strategy and just use your Aeons to sponge all of its attacks, you can capture it a lot easier. Alright, once you get 10 of each from the Cavern of the Stolen Faith, it's time to do a little bit of backtracking, since we might as well knock out additional areas that we are able to travel on by foot. This also helps with level grinding since we have some pretty tough fights coming up on Gagazet and Xanarkin next. So what I like to do after finishing those two areas is I like heading back to Makalania and getting all of the enemies here. So they should be super easy by this point. You should be able to one-shot most of them since you're probably pretty powerful from grabbing 10 of each in the Calmlands and the Cavern of the Stolen Faith. Starting off, we are going to get the Lizard, who is going to be the Iguodon. We're going to get the Helm, which is going to be the Marusu, and we're going to get the Blue Element, which should be very, very easily defeated thanks to our super powerful stats. We have the Wasp, which might still be a little hard to hit since we probably still have pretty low accuracy at this point. We have the Xiphos, which is pretty easy. Then we have the strongest enemy of the area, which is going to be the Chimera Brain, which should be a piece of cake. If you're still having trouble, make sure you just use your null spells. Same strategy as the regular Chimera. And that's actually going to be all the enemies in the woods. So once you get 10 of each of those, it's time to head back to Lake Makalania. So you can take the new Rainbow Trail, which has no encounters on it, and it's a very fast way of getting to the lake. And once we're out here, just walk around the front of the agency and get the 4 enemies here. The Snow Wolf, the Ice Flan, the Helm, who's out here, who's going to be the Mafdet, which is different than the Marusu, but counts as the same area, and then the Evil Eye, which is going to be the bat-looking thing. So get 10 of each of those, and we should be done with yet another area. So once you're done, take the Rainbow Road all the way back to the entrance of the woods and head out front to the Thunder Plains. This is the furthest you are allowed to backtrack at this point since you are not welcome back in Guadosalam. So might as well just take the time to knock out all of the enemies here. So you are going to have the Beware, who is going to be the Evil Eye of the Thunder Plains. The Kusariku, which is going to be the type of Drake, and then you have the Gold Element, who is going to be the Thunder Plains Elemental. Once again, at this point in the game, you should have pretty high stats, and you should be able to one-shot everything. If anything does give you trouble, it's most likely because you have low accuracy. For example, the fast enemies like the Lizard, like the Milusini, or the Imp, which is the Arok. Make sure you just hit them with someone with pretty high accuracy, or you take the time to buff your characters with Aim or Luck. Then you have the Larva, who's pretty easy. It used to have like a ton of health, but then you have high stats now, so you should be able to take it out pretty easily. Then you have the Iron Giant. Iron Giants will only appear in the north part of the Thunder Plains, most preferably around the tower with the shelter under it, so the last tower of the Thunder Plains. Once again, very easy at this point. Just armor break it, and then you should be able to take it out in maybe 1-2 hits. Then the last enemy will only appear after you pray at a cactar stone. It's the cactar with the Q. This is part of the side quest to get the first part of Kamari's ultimate weapon. Once again, they will not start appearing until you pray at least one of the stones. So just find a stone, make sure you interact with it, and they'll start appearing. They are still a pretty low encounter rate, and they're also pretty hard to fight without high enough accuracy, so make sure you are prepared before you decide to start hunting them. After we are done with the Thunder Plains, we are going to continue on with the main story, which is going to take us to Mount Gagazet. So we're going to be on the mountain trail, which is the snowy part. The enemies that we're going to grab here include the Bandersnatch, which is the type of wolf. The Nidhogg is repeated, so we can actually skip him since we already got him in the Cavern of the Stolen Faith. We have the Grenades, which are going to be the stronger version of the bomb. Keep in mind, you have to be able to kill them in 3 hits or else they will self-destruct, so make sure you plan accordingly. Make sure you're doing enough damage so you can actually finish it off with a normal attack. Next up, we have the Grats, which is going to be the plant-looking thing. They are easy enough, however, they do have a significant amount of health. And the hardest enemy out here is going to be the Bashura, who hits hard and has a ton of health. But once again, delay attack is going to be its main weakness. Once you get out of the snow, you should be in Gagazet Cave. Keep in mind, all of the enemies in here, with the exception of the underwater ones, will be repeated in Zanarkand. So if you don't get your 10 here, you can wait a bit in order to get them. You have the Grendel, which is going to be a form of Dual Horn, and you have the Aramon, which is the form of Evil Eye. You have the Dark Flan, which is very annoying to fight since it has a ton of defense. Make sure you hit it with Armor Break and Magic Break, and then you should be able to whittle it down slowly. Then after that, we have the Behemoth. This thing hits really hard, so make sure you put your Protects up and make sure you power break it, and you can kill it eventually. And then finally, the last on-land enemy is going to be the Mandragora, which is going to be a stronger version of the Ochu. So once you are done with that, you are supposed to head underwater in order to activate one of the puzzles, which gets the bridge to get you to the other side of the cave. In the water, you are going to fight 3 types of enemies, which can only be captured underwater. Keep in mind that you have to do this with the underwater crew, so that's Titus, Waka, and Riku. So if you don't have one of their capture weapons, you're going to have to backtrack all the way to the Calmlands in order to grab one of them. So lucky for us, we're using Titus, and we can just reuse his capture weapon. So you have the Splasher, which is the group of fish, the Angelus, which is like the angel fish looking thing, and then finally you have the Male Spike, which is this giant horned fish. So 3 types of fish, all underwater, but they're the only types of underwater enemies you can actually capture. As for finishing up the rest of the arena, we are going to actually have to wait until we unlock the airship in order to capture anything else. Once you have the airship, you are allowed to backtrack wherever you want in the game. So what we are going to do first is we're going to head back to all of the previous areas and fight all of the old fiends that we weren't able to capture since we didn't have the taming weapons available to us yet. So we're going to start off in Besaid, because this is pretty much the earliest you can go back in the game. All the enemies are going to be super weak here. They're going to have about 100 to 300 health, and you should be able to one-shot them very easily. So you have the Dingo, the Condor, and the Water Flan. Once again, very easy to take out, and it should be a cinch capturing 10 of each. Then we're going to head over to Kilika. Once again, having the airship makes things a lot faster since we can just fast travel wherever we want to. From the fast travel station, just head through the village and then into the woods. All of the enemies are going to appear in the Kilika woods, and there's only going to be 4 types of enemies here, so very, very easy to farm this out. So once again, 10 of each should come in no time. We are going to have the Regora, who is probably the most common of the enemies. It's the plant thing. By now, you should definitely be able to one-shot all of these guys. Besides that, we have the Dino Nyx, who is the type of reptile. Then you have the type of bee, which is called the Killer Bee, and the Yellow Element, who is going to be this area's elemental. Once again, very easy to knock out 10 of each. Then off to the Mihen High Road. This is going to be the first more complicated area, since this is the first area that we're backtracking to that has more than half a dozen enemies, and also the enemy locations are going to be split up a bit. My best recommendation is to fast travel to Mihen High Road, which should take you to the agency. Then you want to take the new road all the way to the gate. Here you want to try to capture these enemies. First off, you have the Mihen Fang, so that's going to be the wolf type of enemy. Then you are going to have the Dual Horn, who is going to be the regular Dual Horn. You have the Helm, which is going to be the Raldo, so make sure you get those guys. You are going to have the Floating Eye, who is going to be this area's Evil Eye. Once again, you probably need a little bit higher accuracy in order to hit it consistently, because some of your characters might still not be well so aimed. Then we have the white elemental, who is going to be this area's elemental. Once again, very easy to destroy at this point. And then we have the bomb, which used to give us a lot of trouble since we had to kill it in 3 hits, but we should be able to hit it in 1 now. So capturing those guys will be a lot easier since they do appear in clusters of 3. So that should actually wrap it up for the new road. However, there are going to be 3 enemies that will appear way more consistently in the old road. So once we reach the gate, what we are going to do is we're going to wrap around and then hit up the old road. And here the 3 types of enemies that we are going to look for are going to include the Epira, which is going to be this area's reptile, the Vuvir, which is going to be this area's Drake, as well as the Thunderflan, which is going to be repeated later on when we get to Jose. So if you don't get your 10 here, you can knock it out there as well. However, it is going to be more common in this area, so might as well get your 10 here while you're here. So on to Mushroom Rock Road, we are going to be using the fast travel station that we got from using the God Hand cheat code, since all of the enemies can be found in this little area of the ravine, with the exception of the Garuda. The Garuda can be found in here, however, it's a little more uncommon than the place we are actually going to farm out our 10, so keep that in mind. But starting off, we have the Imp, which is the Gandariwa. You have the Drake, which is going to be the Lamashtu, and then you have the Red Element. Once again, these guys should be easy enough to take out. Then we have the Fungar, which we used to have to worry about it counterattacking. However, we are totally strong enough to take it out before it can react to anything. Next up, we have the Raptor, which is going to be this area's reptile. And then as for the Garudas, once again, they can appear in the ravine. However, a higher encounter rate is going to appear if you take the time to head to the Mushroom Rock Precipice. Unfortunately, it's not easy to fast travel to Mushroom Rock Road, so we have to fast travel to Mihen. Then I recommend taking a Chocobo up to the gate, go through the gate. Be very careful not to run into this group of NPCs right here, because you will trigger the Dark Magus Sisters boss fight, which if you are working on your monster arena, you probably don't have the stats to deal with the Dark Aeons right now, so best to avoid that. Make sure you hug the wall and then take a left and then head through the road until you get to the little elevator. Once you're here, basically what you have to do is you kind of have to farm the area next to the elevator that Operation Mihen took place. So just run around here and Garudas will appear here more likely than not. So once again, fighting 10 of them can be kind of a pain. However, it's way easier to get it done here than rather inside the ravine. So once you get your 10, it's on to the next area, which is going to be Jose. So thankfully, you can actually fast travel to Jose, so it should put you on the beach. Just wrap around the corner and you should be on the high road. Now, Jose High Road can be pretty interesting since the weaker enemies are the more uncommon enemies for whatever reason here. The most common enemy you're going to run into is the Basilisk, which used to give us trouble because of petrification, but especially by now you should be able to one-shot all of them, so easy peasy. Now, your Rogues Gallery of basic enemies are going to include the Garm, who is going to be the type of wolf. You have the Bunyip, who is going to be the type of helm, and then you have the Snowflan, which is going to be the type of flan. A little more uncommon is going to be the Bite Bug, which is going to be this area's type of bee. They appear to be more common closer to the beginning of the road, so closer to the save point. And finally, the bane of my grind was the Simurgh, which is the type of bird, which for me appeared very sparingly, so best of luck finding 10 of them. But once you have all of those, there's actually one last enemy in Jose that only appears on the Moonflow Road, so it could appear on either the south side or the north side. It is going to be more common on the north side, which is the Ochu. So this guy, once again, pretty easy at this point since he has under 10,000 health and you should be able to one-shot him with your main attackers. But if you're having trouble finding 10 of them, just head to the north road. So just ride a shoe puff across, or you can just fast travel to Guado Salam since that's probably a lot faster, and you should be able to get 10 in one of these 2 locations. Next on the chopping block is going to be Beacon Island. This one has a pretty short list, only 6 enemies, and the 3 more common ones usually appear in a group, so that's always good. You have the Sand Wolf, the Alcyone, and the Mushu Su. So one's a wolf, one's a bird, and one's the drake. Very easy to find, and these are probably the most common enemies here. You're also going to find a lot of Machina along the way. Once again, you don't need those towards the capture, so you can just ignore them, or you can just kill them for fun or for level grinding. 2 of the enemies are going going to be way more common in this area right here. This is the save point before the last area before home, if you remember. So if you're lost, it's a big giant open area. There's a save point right next to the sign here, so you just look for it on your mini map. And then to the left of that save point is going to be this ruined city, and in here stronger enemies are going to be more common. And the two stronger enemies you're looking for is going to be the zoo, which is a giant type of bird, and the sandworm, which is a giant type of worm. So very, very, very easy to find in this area. So the zoo is going to be a little interesting since you actually have to kill it twice. You kill it to basically ground it, and then you have to land the finishing blow when it has like 1 HP. So keep that in mind. Make sure your finishing blow is from someone with a capture weapon, and you shouldn't miss it. The sandworm has a ton of health, but once again, he's super easy, especially at this point of the game. As for the sixth and final enemy of the area, it's going to be the cactar. These things are annoyingly rare to find, especially at the beginning or just wandering around Beaconal. So with that in mind, if you do fight one, make sure you cast aim so your accuracy is high enough, and that way you can kill it. If you don't kill it fast enough, it will generally run away, which once again, because it's so rare, is very annoying. Now, if you do find yourself struggling to find cactars in the random, a good opportunity to work on your 10 is during the side mission to work on Riku's Sigil. It will pretty much give you a bunch of mini games that if you do well in them, you will be guaranteed a cactar fight, and you can actually capture those cactars and put that towards the 10 that you need for the monster arena. If that doesn't go well for you, say if you're bad at the mini game or the cactars are giving you a lot of trouble for whatever reason, after finishing all of the mini games, you should clear the sandstorm in this area to get Riku's Sigil. It's going to be called the Cactus Garden, and in here cactar spawns are going to be way higher than anywhere else in the desert, and you will also have the opportunity to fight multiple cactars at a time. I believe you can fight up to 2 at a time, which will definitely help out for getting your 10. So that is the perfect place in order to knock out your 10 cactar captures. Now, once we wrap up Beaconal, we should have only 2 areas left in the game. Before moving on, I highly recommend that you take the time and build yourself these sets of armors for all of your party members that you're using to get these captures. So for your 2 attackers, or the ones actually doing the capturing, you want Confused, Dark, Poison, and Stoneproof. You also want a third person who's going to be your designated healer to have Confused, Berserk, Silence, and Poison Proof. The reason for all of this is in case you run to a situation where you get ambushed by a Great Marlborough or a Monolith, you can prevent your party from getting an insta-game over. So a Great Marlborough will always ambush with a bad breath, which will put a myriad of conditions on all of your party members. The ones you obviously want to avoid are going to be Confused, which will prevent your party from killing itself, and Berserk, which will prevent your third member, the one generally without a taming weapon, to accidentally kill the Great Marlborough. And if a Demonolith gets an ambush, it will usually use Breath, which will petrify the entire team, which will obviously result in an instant game over. We are trying to avoid any instant game overs because if we ever get a game over, it will obviously not save any progress between the time of that game over and our previous save. So if you're in the middle of a big capture run, you are obviously going to lose a ton of progress. So make sure you build these armors in order to save yourself any trouble going forward. Once all of your armors and stuff are put together, it is time to hit up the last 2 locations. We're going to start off with Sin. This is the last area you go to canonically in the story. You're going to start off in the sea right here in this area with a ton of fog. Most common enemies you are going to find here are going to be the Adamantoise. This thing has a ton of health and lots of armor. Use Armor Break and then slowly chip away at it, and you should be able to capture 10 fairly easily since it is common. Next up is going to be the X-ray type of mushroom. Kill it quickly so it doesn't counterattack with its version of pollen. Then you have the Behemoth King, who will not counterattack with Meteor if you do end up capturing it, which is always a plus. And the final 2 that appear out on the sea is going to be the 2 Gemini Iron Giants. Keep in mind that these 2 will count as separate enemies in the monster arena, so you have to capture 10 of both. However, the benefit of that is they will never appear separately from one another, so it's just going to take 10 encounters of both of them. Just make sure that you defeat both of them using capture weapons. On to the actual city inside Sin. Our first enemy is going to be the Great Marlborough, the very annoying one. He is going to use Bad Breath if he gets an ambush, or if he doesn't, he's going to try to use it as his first attack. So my best advice is to try to take him out as quickly as you can. So he's going to have quite a bit of health that you probably can't take out, especially if you're using just your taming weapon, since you have the damage limit to worry about. But this is where our armors came in handy. The reason for that is if he does use Bad Breath, we can pretty much avoid all of the negative status conditions. Next up is going to be the Wraith, pretty much the same thing as the Ghost from the Cavern of the Stolen Faith, except a little stronger. Watch out for Doom when it casts it, and you should be good. The Demonolith, if it does get an ambush on you, it will hit you with Stone Breath, and that will mess you up because it will petrify your whole team unless you built those armors. And then the final enemy, who actually has a pretty low encounter rate, so best of luck trying to grab 10 of him, is going to be the Barbados. And with that, that's going to wrap it up for Sin. Then it's on to the last location, which is an optional area and has some pretty high-level post-game enemies. You want to go to Sid, go to the search command on the airship, punch in these coordinates, roughly 7237. That should unlock the Omega Ruins, and once you go here, you can challenge yourself by fighting some tough-level enemies. So, first one is going to be the Zorus. He's going to be the type of lizard here. Then you have the Floating Death, which is going to be this place's Evil Eye. After that, we have the Halma, which is going to be this area's Helm. Nothing's too bad here. If you have pretty decent stats, you are in the post game now, so there's no real limit to how strong you can be. So you have the Spirit, which is going to be the type of larva here. You have the Black Elemental, which can be pretty annoying. However, its major weakness is if you cast Osmos on it, it pretty much becomes a sitting duck. The Poroboros, which is just like the bomb or the grenade, make sure you are able to kill it in 3 turns, which you should just be able to if you have 3 attackers who can start hitting the damage limit. Master Corals, pretty easy, but fairly uncommon spawn. You have the Macheas, which are very annoying since their spawn rate is super low, so best of luck trying to find 10 of them. And the last 2 enemies, although uncommon, a few pre-spawned ones will appear on the path to reach the final boss fight of the dungeon against Omega Weapon. Is going to be the Master Toneberry, which you do have to be careful because Karma does hit hard, so make sure you're prepared when fighting these guys, as well as the Varuna, these guys who will auto-cast haste, so they're pretty speedy. However, these guys are actually pretty weak and can be taken out with a bunch of quick and easy hits. So that's going to be all the enemies in the game. Make sure you have 10 of everyone and you should be done with the monster arena. Don't forget to come back for part 2 where we will be covering every single monster arena boss fight, which we do have to get through in order to unlock Nemesis, but this was all of the enemies that you needed to capture and some basic tips for some of the harder to find ones. Hope you enjoyed the episode, and that's all there is to it.